The invitation arrived in my mailbox, not via email like normal family communications. Formal cardstock, embossed lettering. Susan Hartley requests your presence at the annual Women's Wellness Foundation Luncheon. My mother's name. Her foundation. But at the bottom a handwritten note. Mira, you're welcome to attend, but seating is limited. We've placed you at the volunteer coordination table in the garden room. The main ballroom is reserved for major donors and board members. I know you'll understand, Mom. The volunteer coordination table. In the garden room, which was the polite name for the enclosed patio where they put overflow guests and people who didn't matter. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long moment. My mother had been running the Women's Wellness Foundation for 8 years, ever since she retired from her interior design business. It was her pride and joy. A nonprofit providing health services and wellness programs to underserved women. She threw this luncheon annually, raising funds and courting donors with the same energy she'd once used to land high-end clients. My older sister Priya was on the foundation's board. She'd been featured in the program for the past 3 years as Director of Community Outreach, though as far as I could tell her main contribution was posting about the foundation on social media and hosting wine nights for potential donors. Our mother treated Priya's involvement like a coronation, constantly praising her philanthropic leadership and commitment to women's causes. When I'd expressed interest in the foundation's work 2 years ago, Mom had patted my hand. Oh Mira, that's sweet. But nonprofit work requires a certain sophistication. A network. You're still building your career. Maybe when you're more established. More established. I was a program coordinator at a community health clinic. Or at least that's what I told my family, because explaining the full scope of my work made their eyes glaze over. They heard community health and filed me away as someone doing basic administrative work for modest pay, noble but unimpressive compared to Priya's marketing director position at a tech startup. What they didn't know, what I'd stopped trying to explain 3 years ago, was that I was the executive director of the Riverside Health Equity Initiative, a $50 million foundation funded by a coalition of healthcare systems and private donors. We provided grants to organizations serving vulnerable populations, funded research on health disparities, and partnered with community clinics to expand access to care, including a $2.3 million partnership with Women's Wellness Foundation that I'd personally approved 8 months ago. The grant paid for their new mobile health clinic, 3 staff positions, and an expansion of their mental health services. My name was on the grant agreement as the authorizing executive, but apparently, my mother had never read past the foundation name on the check. I looked at the invitation again. The volunteer coordination table in the garden room. Then I opened my laptop and checked the luncheon schedule. The program included a segment called Foundation Partnerships and Major Grants, where my mother would announce significant funding sources and thank key supporters. I was scheduled to give brief remarks about the Riverside Health Equity Initiative's priorities, a standard courtesy when we made major grants. My assistant had confirmed the details with Mom's foundation director 2 weeks ago. My mother had no idea I was on the program. She'd delegated the logistics to her staff and never connected Mira Patel, executive director, Riverside Health Equity Initiative, with her daughter Mira, who did something vague with community health. I RSVP'd that I would attend. I didn't mention the speaking slot. I didn't correct the seating assignment. The luncheon was Saturday at the Grandview Hotel. I arrived early wearing a charcoal pantsuit, professional, understated. The garden room was exactly as I'd expected. Smaller, less decorated, with a view of the parking lot rather than the hotel's landscape. My assigned table had name cards for 6 volunteers who helped with foundation mailings and event setup. Through the open doorway I could see the main ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, floral centerpieces, and round tables with elegant place settings. My mother held court near the front, wearing a rose-colored dress and pearls, greeting guests with the practiced warmth of someone who'd spent decades networking. Priya stood beside her in a designer outfit I recognized from her Instagram, laughing with a group of women I didn't recognize. At the head table sat the foundation's board members, and I noticed several major donors my mother had been courting. Empty seats waited for Mom and Priya. No one looked toward the garden room. Why would they? I took my seat at the volunteer table. The women there were kind, asking what brought me to the foundation's work. I kept my answers vague, mentioning an interest in women's health initiatives. They shared stories about stuffing envelopes and setting up event registration tables, the unglamorous work that kept nonprofits running. The program began at noon. My mother took the microphone, radiant with pride. Welcome everyone to our 8th annual luncheon. Thanks to your generous support, Women's Wellness Foundation has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We've served over 5,000 women this year, expanded our services, and launched a mobile health clinic that's bringing care directly to underserved communities. Applause filled the ballroom. Mom continued, detailing the foundation's achievements with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed in the mission. Whatever else was true, she cared about this work. She just didn't think I was sophisticated enough to be part of it. After lunch service, Mom introduced Priya. My daughter has been instrumental in raising our profile and connecting us with new supporters. Priya, come say a few words about our community outreach. Priya approached the microphone, comfortable and polished. She talked about social media engagement and donor cultivation events, about building bridges, and expanding our circle of impact. It was 80% marketing jargon and 20% substance, but she delivered it well. Mom beamed from the head table. Then came the segment I'd been waiting for. Now, Mom said, returning to the microphone, I want to talk about partnerships. This year we received a transformational grant that changed everything for our foundation. The Riverside Health Equity Initiative awarded us $2.3 million over 3 years, the largest grant in our history. This funding made our mobile clinic possible, allowed us to hire specialized staff, and expanded our mental health services beyond anything we'd dreamed. She clicked to a slide showing the mobile clinic, the new staff, the program expansions. I'm thrilled to announce that a representative from Riverside Health Equity Initiative is here today to share their perspective on our partnership. Please welcome Executive Director Mira Patel. The ballroom fell silent. Mom's expression shifted from proud to confused as she scanned the head table where she'd apparently expected to find me. I stood up in the garden room. Every head in the main ballroom turned. The volunteer coordinator beside me gasped softly. I walked through the doorway separating the garden room from the ballroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The walk to the podium felt longer than it was. I could see my mother's face clearly now. Confusion giving way to recognition, giving way to something that looked like horror. Priya had gone pale. Her hand covered her mouth. I reached the microphone and adjusted it slightly. Thank you, Susan. I'm Mira Patel, Executive Director of the Riverside Health Equity Initiative. It's a pleasure to be here today, though I notice my assigned seating was in the garden room with the volunteers rather than the main ballroom. An understandable oversight. Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. Mom had sat down heavily in her chair. I want to commend Women's Wellness Foundation for the exceptional work they're doing. When my team reviewed their grant application 8 months ago, we were impressed by their commitment to serving vulnerable populations and their innovative approach to mobile health services. That's why I personally approved the $2.3 million grant that Susan mentioned. I clicked to the next slide, which my assistant had prepared. A breakdown of the grant's impact metrics. Our foundation has funded 43 organizations this year, totaling $50 million in grants. We prioritize partnerships with groups that demonstrate measurable outcomes, strong community connections, and sustainable program models. Women's Wellness Foundation excelled in all categories. I paused, looking directly at my mother. Nonprofit work does require sophistication, as Susan mentioned to me. It requires understanding complex funding mechanisms, navigating healthcare systems, measuring social impact, and building networks across multiple sectors. I'm grateful that my background in public health and grant management prepared me for this work. The audience was rapt. Several people were taking notes. A few had pulled out phones. Our foundation's current priority is expanding access to mental health services for underserved women, which aligns perfectly with Women's Wellness Foundation's new programs. I'm pleased to announce today that Riverside Health Equity Initiative is extending our partnership with an additional $1.5 million over 2 years, specifically designated for mental health expansion. Gasps and applause. Mom's face had progressed from horror to something unreadable. Priya was staring at her lap. However, I continued, and the room quieted immediately, this extension comes with updated requirements. All partner organizations must demonstrate inclusive governance and authentic community engagement. That includes ensuring that people with lived experience in the communities you serve, people who might not fit traditional donor profiles, have meaningful seats at your decision-making tables. Not volunteer coordination tables in garden rooms, but actual positions of influence. The pointed reference landed. Several people glanced toward the garden room, then back at me. I look forward to continuing our work with Women's Wellness Foundation as they grow and evolve. Thank you. I stepped away from the podium. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I walked back toward my table in the garden room, but the foundation's program director intercepted me. Miss Patel, I'm so sorry about the seating confusion. If I'd known, if anyone had told me you were Susan's daughter, we would never have. It's fine, I said. The volunteers and I had a lovely conversation. Mom was suddenly there, her face flushed. Mira, can we speak privately? Please. I glanced at my watch. I have another appointment in 30 minutes. Perhaps we can talk briefly. We moved to a quiet corner. Priya joined us, looking stricken. You're the executive director, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. You approved our grant. You control $50 million. How did we not know this? I told you 3 years ago that I'd been promoted to executive director. You said, that's nice, dear, and changed the subject to ask Priya about her marketing campaign. I mentioned the foundation's budget at Thanksgiving. Dad said my work sounded very technical, and asked Priya about her startup's latest funding round. I tried explaining grant management at your birthday. You told me nonprofit work wasn't really a career, just something people did while finding their path. Priya's voice was small. The grant application. Your name was on it. On every page. I signed the approval letter personally. My contact information is in the partnership agreement. But no one in this family reads the details of my work. You see, community health, and assume I'm doing administrative tasks for modest pay. Mom's hand trembled as she touched her pearls. The additional $1.5 million you announced. Is that real? Completely real. Contingent on the governance requirements I mentioned. Your board needs to reflect the communities you serve. That means recruiting people beyond your country club network. People who understand these issues from lived experience, not just philanthropic interest. The way you announced it, Priya said. Mentioning the garden room seating. You did that on purpose. I did. You excluded me from the main event because you assumed I wasn't sophisticated enough for your donor circles. Then I walked in as the person who funds your entire operation. Yes, I made sure everyone understood the irony. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Mira, I'm so sorry. I've been so wrong about your work. About you. I thought. I've been celebrating Priya's social media posts about the foundation while ignoring that my other daughter is running a $50 million operation that makes our foundation possible. It's not about celebration, I said. It's about respect. About basic curiosity regarding what your own daughter does for a living. About not assigning me to the overflow seating at your event while putting Priya on the board based on her Instagram presence. The program director approached again, apologetic. Miss Patel, several attendees are asking for your contact information. They're interested in learning about grant opportunities with Riverside Health Equity Initiative. Of course. I'll make myself available after the program concludes. I spent the next hour in the main ballroom, where I apparently should have been seated all along, speaking with nonprofit leaders, healthcare professionals, and yes, even some of my mother's major donors who wanted to understand our foundation's priorities. Several board members from other organizations handed me cards, asking about partnership possibilities. My mother watched from across the room, her luncheon continuing around her. Priya sat at the head table looking lost. When I finally left, Mom followed me to the parking lot. Can we talk? Tomorrow? Please? I need to understand what I've missed. What I've been missing for years. I'll think about it, I said. Right now, I need to get to my actual appointment. A site visit with another grant partner who's launching a reproductive health program. Will you still support our foundation? The additional funding you announced. That depends entirely on whether you meet the governance requirements. If you're serious about inclusive leadership and community representation, yes. If this is just your social club doing charity work, no. The decision is yours. I drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot of the hotel where she'd assigned me to the servants' quarters of her important event. My phone exploded with messages over the next week. Apologies, explanations, requests to meet. The foundation's board held an emergency meeting without Mom to discuss governance reforms. 3 board members resigned. 5 new community representatives were recruited, including 2 women who'd been served by the foundation's programs. Priya sent a long email acknowledging she'd coasted on social media performance while dismissing my actual expertise. She offered to step down from the board. I told her to stay but to do real work. Mom and I eventually met for coffee. She brought a notebook and asked real questions about grant management, health equity, and foundation operations. She cried. She apologized. She admitted she'd been playing at philanthropy while I'd been doing the actual work. I didn't forgive her that day, or the next month. But 6 months later, when Women's Wellness Foundation submitted their progress report showing genuine governance changes and authentic community engagement, I approved the extended funding. The next year's luncheon had a different seating chart. No garden room overflow. No donor hierarchy. Round tables mixing board members, volunteers, community representatives, and yes, major funders, all treated as equally valuable voices. Mom introduced me from the podium. My daughter Mira, whose foundation makes our work possible, and who taught me that sophistication in nonprofit work means centering the communities we serve, not the donors we court. I sat at a table with 3 women who'd accessed the foundation's services, 2 volunteers and a healthcare administrator. We had the best conversation of the day. The volunteer coordination table still existed. But now it was in the main ballroom equal to everyone else.